So, this is a video I've been wanting to make for a little while. Basically, ever since I realized that I am no longer really a Nintendo fan. It's very interesting to me. This is the company that has introduced me to games, the greatest love of my life. It's a company that has made some of the greatest works of art, I think, ever. And it's sad for me to come to this realization that I really am not apathetic necessarily about what they're doing, but simply not interested. And it's a sad realization to come to. You know, when I was 5 years old, I was given my first Game Boy Advance, my first game system with my first game, Super Mario World, packaged as Mario Advance 3 or whatever. And what a sad thing. I mean, it was great to get that game. It's something about just the natural, all the normal things about games. Mario's a great series to start with because if you're someone who's never delved into interactive media at all, just the simple joy of moving around a space and jumping is really thrilling if it feels right and the levels are designed in a way that piques the imagination just a bit. That's what I'm here for at Square One, and that's something that Nintendo's definitely in that time period doing really well. It's something they've always done well. If we continue tracking very closely this relationship with Nintendo over the years, then at age 6, I get my first GameCube, which is my first home console. And with that, Billy Hatcher and the Giant Egg, which, not a Nintendo-made game, it's a Sega game, but it's an important game to me as a Nintendo game, because that was why I wanted to get the GameCube, as I saw that in the store, and I was like, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen in my entire life. Truly incredible. Same birthday, I believe I got Kirby's Nightmare in Dreamland, a game that absolutely blew my mind at the time. Nothing could compare to that for me, with just the way the backgrounds in that game were so beautifully realized, and all the secrets and stuff, that weren't too hard to find. It's easy to 100% that game, but the fact that they were there just added a lot more intrigue to the world. The Super Mario world had secrets, but they felt gamier in a sense. Kirby's Nightmare in Dreamland, I think just the way the backgrounds were so beautiful. Something about that combined with the overworld maps being similarly done, and the music, of course, is all classic in that game. And the sound font's just so, I don't know, simple but nice. There's almost nothing else that sounds exactly like it. It's really a phenomenal game, and I spend so much time just in sound tests listening to sound effects and the music, because it really drew me in. And the same goes for Billy Hatcher. That's a game that I don't want to say it only could have existed on the GameCube at the time, but it felt great on the GameCube. It probably was on PS2, for all I know. But I don't know. It's different now. Now if Billy Hatcher came out nowadays as PS4 and Switch simul release, the PS4 version would be the obvious good version, and the Switch version would be obviously of lower quality, because the Switch just can't compete technically. And Billy Hatcher, for being a simple game, definitely what one would call a kid's game, still very beautiful. The lighting in that game still gets to me. The way the nighttime stages look, and with the glowing eggs and the sound effect of that, I don't know, glowing aura, it all is very atmospheric and kind of moody, that game. Not to say it's dark at all, but to say that it's a game the direction of which does not take lightly what is going on. It's a light-hearted game without being a flimsy one. And this is something that is bothering me more and more nowadays, is this feeling that Nintendo products are flimsy. I felt this, I think, first with the Wii U gamepad. Now, I bought a Wii U, all the hardcore Nintendo fanboys are going to defend it, The Wii U is kind of where everything started to go south with this. The Wii U gamepad, the D-pad on it sucks. The buttons are horrible. Like, you don't need a pro controller for that console, or at least you shouldn't. But the reason you do is that the gamepad just feels awful to hold. It feels like a toy. It's so lightweight and blocky and just hideous. Like, compared to the Switch, at least feels denser and more like, I don't know, tangible in a way. That one felt completely like I'm holding air, like I've spent all this money on air. But even the Switch Joy-Cons now, they're so expensive you have to buy them in pairs, but I mean, the buttons are so, they're like the clicky kind of buttons. The DSi had these as well. And like, you hold it in your hand, it's also weightless. I mean, unless you're holding the whole Switch, but the Joy-Con themselves, they're so tiny, it really feels like, I mean, as someone with big hands and like a strong grip, it's very awkward to hold them. I constantly feel like I'm going to break them, because I did, in fact, break the L button on a friend of mine's, and my joysticks are drifting, as seems to be a common issue. I just don't understand this. The GameCube to me felt like a deluxe controller. Far more than the fucking Xbox Duke, which was hideous, or the PS2 controller, which I think is about the most neutral controller I can imagine. Like, the PS2 was and I'm speaking as someone who loves the PS4 controller, but I thought the PS2 controller, like with the weight and the way it holds and stuff, is really just completely inoffensive, but also not amazing. But the GameCube controller, like, there's a reason people still want to use it today over, pro controllers and stuff. It's a good feeling controller. The mapping of the A button, it's all big, and the B button is a little smaller. All that, it's great. It's like taking the N64 controller's like willingness to do something totally different and mixing it with like real functionality and ergonomic design, which is awesome, And I feel that they upped the ante on that even more with the Wii. Like, the Wii Remote, the Wii Remote's a little small, but with the Wii Motion Plus, it felt great. I kept that on almost all the time. And that and the Nunchuck is probably my favorite controller, because you don't have to be locked in any one position. It's so casual. And the feeling, I played Trauma Center recently, Trauma Center New Blood on the Wii for the first time. And that game is like, the mechanics are not even that complicated, but it's the simple joy of just like having that one-to-one feedback, even if it's not perfect, even if the sensor bar is not perfect, just having that sense of immediate like response from your physical motion other than just pressing buttons is, I mean, it goes a long way in automatically inspiring a sense of joy in me. I mean, that's a power it had all the way back then, and it's a power that it definitely has now. It's something that I love. It's something that I think VR tends to do the first time you use it. It's a similar kind of feeling, only this hasn't worn off on me at all. Not to say that VR has, but I think a lot of VR motion controllers tend to feel too blocky and too big and too heavy. I think the Wii Remote did a great job of not feeling sacred while I was holding it, but without feeling like a flimsy toy the way I think the Joy-Cons and the gamepad do. So I think that ultimately that was a fantastic one. And I mean, the whole Wii was great. It, introduced the Virtual Console, which was fantastic. Introduced me to so many older games, and I loved playing them on the classic controller, even though I won't defend that as a perfect controller. It obviously has a lot of problems for a lot of people. Gosh, it's just great memories, because those games were all there. There were tons of them, and everyone wanted to develop things like WiiWare as well for the Wii, And this is something the Switch has today. I mean, the Switch is like a cornucopia of like cheap games and indie games. And if you're someone that only wants to play stuff like that, and well, the Switch is an okay option for you, but also get a computer. You're going to be able to play those things a lot more cheaply, and in the, environment they were designed in almost every case, The Switch, it has a lack of exclusives in that way. Almost, people get so excited about Switch ports, and it's really, kind of infectious, but it also kind of grosses me out when I see things on Twitter like, oh, what game do you want to get ported to Switch in 2020? It's like, why are we celebrating this? We should be wanting exclusives. I mean, thoughts aside about exclusivity as a concept and whether it's good or bad for the games industry as a whole, but simply on the fact of like, gosh, why am I buying a Switch? Why did I buy it? I bought it for Disgaea? I could have played that on my PS4, Did I buy it for Mario Odyssey? Yeah, I guess. Well, compare a game like Mario Odyssey to like Mario Galaxy, Mario Odyssey is one that a lot of people are going to like because it doesn't do a lot of the things Galaxy did. A lot of people are going to like it because it has a more open sense where it's just a playground you can run around in. But it feels so much less directed to me in the way that I felt Billy Hatcher was very well directed. I felt like Mario Galaxy was as well, where each galaxy, each planet felt like this one very tightly constructed experience meant to carry me through an overall emotional experience. And I thought that was impeccably beautiful. And no amount of power moons, is going to change that for me. No amount of level geometry or mechanics I can use to interact with it is going to change that level design and that like sense of wonder, that music. I mean, the fucking, that's another thing in the music category. I mean, you look at Zelda Breath of the Wild has like, I don't know, 15 songs in it. I like a couple of them, I mean, I like all of them. It's a good soundtrack. Can it work over, an 80 to 160 hour playthrough? No. It wouldn't work if you played them on loop infinitely, and it sure as hell doesn't work when it's mostly just silence to make up for that. It's so easy to take something like that and call it artistic. But something artistic like that is better saved for a game like Journey that you can beat in 3 or 4 hours. You don't want to, at a certain point with something that's overtly going for like a more experimental theme, that's great. I love experimental games, but an experiment is only interesting until you have fully analyzed and driven the conclusions from it. Once you have fully analyzed and gotten your conclusions from an experiment, the experiment is over. The experiment that is Breath of the Wild soundtrack ends about 10 hours into it tops, and that game asks you to play it for so much longer. I think Mario Odyssey does the same thing. It's this problem. I don't know why they're so obsessed with this, Twilight Princess, I felt, was a very, very, say what you will about that game being less innovative than Breath of the Wild. Sure, it is less experimental, but it's a very well-directed game. It has beautiful music and incredibly fascinating world concepts with the way the Twilight and the normal world interact. It's just so rich and beautiful. Those segments where you're just collecting little teardrops around the Twilight, you can malign that as being pretty simple and not that interesting mechanically, and you'd be absolutely right. But it's simply the fact of exploring these worlds that feel twisted. Even if they're only doing that with some basic, GameCube era shaders, they're still doing it. They still had the idea to go for that. Breath of the Wild has some really cool environments you can go in. There's the red forest with the thunder that's always going on, and the, Gerudo town I thought was amazing, and the Zora domain was great. Basically all the towns are great. But they're surrounded by just miles and miles of nothing, and it really is nothing. And, I mean, you can call it something because there are shrines, but what's the emotional experience of a shrine? You go where you're told by a little annoying blinking indicator. You didn't really discover it. You didn't really figure it out. You just kind of followed where the thing said, and then, you only have 5 tools, so just, use every tool you have until one of them works, and then you're there. Twilight Princess doesn't do that. Ocarina of Time didn't do that. The original Legend of Zelda, I would say, did not do that. The original Legend of Zelda, you have so many tools, and you really don't know how you're going to use them. And that's what makes that game really cool, I think. But Breath of the Wild is so streamlined that it feels dead to me in that sense. It doesn't have that same sense of wonder because there's nothing to wonder about. It all makes sense. It's all explained to you pretty well, you know. It's simultaneously too guided and too open, you know? Whereas I think the series has always lived beautifully in the space between of an uncertain linearity. And that's something amazing. That's something that's been totally lost. I hope they fix it with the new one. I'm actually looking forward to the new Legend of Zelda because it, I don't know, at least looks a little darker. Maybe they'll have all the assets from Breath of the Wild. I trust Eiji Onuma as like a genius, you know? I mean, he's certainly smarter than I am, and I know he can make a great game. So I don't doubt the team and their ability to make a great game, but I distrust Nintendo as this group that I feel is using branding of these old properties to, you know, basically is taking these properties that people love and is saying, hey, this property sells well, but, you know, we don't want to do the same thing gameplay-wise. We're Nintendo. We're known for innovation. Okay, how do we innovate? Well, what is everyone else doing? You know? Oh, open worlds are big right now? Let's just make the biggest one, and we'll call it Zelda. And then we'll say, oh, we're going back to our roots, even if what's really there is something completely different. Or we'll take Mario and do almost the same thing, but we'll make it a little more kid-friendly, a little more sandboxy. We'll package that as its own thing, make it super dead easy if you want to beat it, and, you know, pretty hard to master it. That's something people love today. It feels so trendy to me. You know, you can call Nintendo extremely innovative with the Switch because it is. Because the concept of the Switch is something people have wanted forever, and now that they have it, they can't get enough of it. It's so easy to sell a Switch game now that everyone wants to be on it and everyone's overcharging for it. And Nintendo is doing the same thing. They're saying, hey, we know we can sell a game if we package it with these trendy mechanics and this, you know, classic IP. It'll get the feeling of being timeless, but also fresh that way. But I feel like it's not tricking me anymore. You know, I can't get behind these games. Three Houses is a good game. Fire Emblem Three Houses is the first of these Switch games I'll be talking about that I think is actually good. It is a really, I mean, the mechanics do a good job, I think, of actually getting you in the role of a teacher and actually making you think about your students before yourself. That's how I've been feeling with it in any case. But my problem is that even though it does this, the overall narrative, the writing of the main cutscenes, it's on such a different level than like the small scenes where you're just talking to someone around the school. I feel like all that flavor text is great, but what's supposed to be the main narrative is getting lost on me somewhere because everything is so transparent when you know, happen to run into these guys and protect them because they're being taken on by bandits or whatever, and you're a mercenary, you know? That's a cool scene in the beginning. But then all of a sudden you have these three guys asking you to join their kingdom, and it doesn't, like, when did we establish this trust? Like, when did this even come up? You know, it's just like these cute characters having like their little, you know, witty Marvel dialogue back and forth, the Three Houses mascots. And like, you know, then it's like, which of us do you think is cuter? All of a sudden, it's so openly like you are buying this game to like pick between Team Instinct, Team Mystic, and Team, you know, Valor. And, you know, that's all these guys are. And it's not true when you get into like the nitty gritty of the game. But I feel this is something very transparent throughout the story, you know, especially with the one teacher whose like personality is she's a slut. It's ridiculous. It's like, it's so open-faced, like, oh yeah, you can date people, but if you don't want to date one of the students, you can date this teacher, you know? It's like, it feels so awkward to me. I'm just not gonna get in on that. If like, I know what's on the box, you know? I know why I bought this game. I know why people are gonna buy this game, even if I'm not the most interested in the romantic stuff or the, I don't know, the kitschy aspect of it. I'm still, I don't know, I don't want to feel like the game is about selling it to me. I want the game to be about something that ends up being very different than the, you know, marketing pitch for it. I know that sounds weird. I don't mean I want to be lied to. I mean I want to get into something and find that it was far deeper than I could have gotten from a short trailer. And with Three Houses, I constantly feel like, no, basically what you see is what you get, you know? And it's sad that that's the case, you know, with a series that has always done that for me, you know? I mean, even Fire Emblem Awakening, which I find to be the most shallow game in the series, at least that I've played, I've always found these games to really surprise me with how invested I get in them. You know, and I love Fire Emblem, but I never expect it to go that extra mile, and it always does. And I guess this time I was expecting it because I loved Fates, and it just didn't. It just kind of, I felt like it left me hanging a little bit. You know, mechanically, the game is beautiful. With the amount of world information that exists, it's also beautiful. You know, it does a great job of making sure you never quite understand how everything is connected in the exposition, but that it gives an overall sense of a real world, and I love that. I feel like the characters are not expertly written, but I think that they're definitely serviceable. But I just can't deal with this kind of, like, hamstringing. Is that what you call it? When a game just kind of, like, every major cutscene is like, oh yeah, and there's this lolly girl, and we have to turn back the hands of time. Like, why would I say that in that scene where it's like, oh no, you're gonna die, what do we do? Oh, I know, turn back the hands of time. Why would I think that's something we could do? Because I read it on the back of the box? Why do I even have Shinobu in my head in the first place? Why is Shinobu in Fire Emblem? I don't get it. So that's what I mean when I'm talking about transparency. I feel like the marketing of the Switch is taking over the content, and I don't care for that, you know? I mean, with the Wii, you had a lot of gimmicky ass motion control games, and you had basically any game that was released on any platform other than the Wii and was on the Wii, you didn't want to play it on the Wii. Except it's like, you know, a shooter or something, maybe, because you can point. But for the most part, yeah, no, never. But the Wii didn't need that because it had such life, such creative passion from the people who did know how to develop for it. And that's what made it great. You didn't need the other games to make the Wii worth it. Whereas the Switch is only worth it because it has so many games, none of which feel like they could have only been on the Switch. None of which feel like seminal, like conclusive, not conclusive, but like, you know, timeless games. I don't think there's a classic game on the Switch anywhere. I mean, like, there are, you know, indie games. There's Undertale. That'll be remembered, you know. But there's no Switch exclusive like that. I mean, I've been looking for it as hard as I can, you know. Mario Maker 2 felt like Mario Maker 1 with a tiny bit extra, and it's a little buggier. I don't particularly want that. It's not interesting to me, you know. The Wii U, say what you will, it had some interesting stuff going on. They were really trying to do something innovative with that console, and I respect the hell out of that. I'll never stop respecting Nintendo when they do that. But the Switch is not trying with that heart. 1-2 Switch is not trying with that heart. The only game on the Switch that's captured me in that way has been Snipper Clips, actually. Snipper Clips was amazing. Snipper Clips probably will not go down in history as a classic because it's such a small game, but it is a worthwhile game. And it's a game I can truly say, this is a Switch game. no other game can I say this about. Everything else is either, well, you didn't buy the Wii U, so here you go, or, you know, one of these classic titles, trendy mechanics, or trendy marketing, you know, which is what Fire Emblem Three Houses is doing, is this, like, viral marketing nonsense. Which house are you? Get out of here. It's so transparent. It barely... like, I don't mind that if it's concealing a really deep game, you know? Like, I don't mind some silly marketing. My problem is not with the marketing. My problem is that I think the marketing is influencing the game more than the game is influencing the marketing. And I know that that's probably common, but it's very transparent in this case, you know? And it's not just because I'm older, you know? Because with the Wii U, I mean, I felt like I could completely see through that whole system. It was like, I mean, it was misguided, you know? I mean, the Wii U never had great marketing, but it felt like the developers really cared about what they were doing with it, you know? It felt like that with the GameCube, with the Wii. It's always felt like that to me. It felt that way with the DS. Remember the DS? The DS was so genuinely exciting when it came out because so many people wanted to develop for it because it did something we all wanted. It did something actually great. You know, for all the people that I hear talking bad about Wii motion control, I don't hear that about the DS because the DS wasn't trying to be a home console. The DS knew its place and it served it perfectly. The DS was a way for people to experiment with, you know, a whole different world of what game design could be with the second screen and the touch screen. I mean, it was incredible to see all the great things that people came up with out of that. You know, the 3DS was, you know, a blatantly forced gimmick because they even gave up on it at a certain point with the 3D not even being in most 3DS games at the end. But it was still a continuation of what the DS was doing, and when the Wii U died, the 3DS kind of came up in a way where that was the Nintendo console people had, and that was what people were developing for. And you had great stuff coming out on that simply because it was a great extension of what the DS was. You know, the DS sequel didn't need to be more than DS with higher specs because the DS concept was great. But the DS concept doesn't exist in modern gaming anymore. It's gone. I don't think we're finished with it. I don't think that everything a designer might do with the DS has been done yet. So it's sad for me to see that drop, and when it does, and it's replaced by the Switch, which has a touchscreen, but you can only use it half the time, so why would you ever develop something that needs it? Similarly with the motion control, the Switch is the exact same way. The Wii, that was the way you got around the damn home menu, was with motion controls. So you're gonna use it everywhere. The Switch, people don't even know that it has motion control. People don't even know it has a touchscreen. It's so sad because, you know, it feels to me as though those things are just an excuse for people like me to not think that those media are dead. But they are, and it's sad. It's very sad to me, you know, that Nintendo is no longer, to me, doing interesting new forms of play, but is rather just basically delivering what the PS4 could do better, but worse. And you can take it on the go. But, I mean, again, taking it on the go, it doesn't meaningfully impact the way games should be designed for it. And it is impacting the way games are designed for it. I think that Mario Odyssey, Three Houses, Breath of the Wild, I'm trying to think of other ones, like Mario Maker even. These are all games that have had their influence, that have taken influence from the fact that you can take the Switch on the go. They're all games that have something fun you can do while it's docked, i.e. advance the story, go to new areas, you know, that you want to see on your big screen, get really immersed in these environments, but also something you can do on the go, you know, which essentially equates to tiny, meaningless little challenges that are very consumable, you know, shrines or Korok seed gathering, you know, all the billions of moons in Mario Odyssey that aren't story important, and, you know, Mario Maker's story mode, which is not really that fun or interesting to me. I mean, there's some cool things done with it, but the core conceit of it is just so disinteresting. That you're building up this castle, and what does that mean for me? You know, it's so stupid, and they keep doing it, and it keeps working. I hate it. I hate how bought in everyone is, you know? I mean, I want a Nintendo that sparks genuine excitement to create new things, not just from, you know, themselves. Not just a Nintendo that creates great hardware for their own developers, but a Nintendo that creates great hardware for third parties to want to work with it, you know? SMT5 was announced for Switch because, I don't know, the Switch was hot at the time. It almost feels like they're regretting that decision now, you know? Now that they're working in Unreal and making a Switch game and realizing, oh, this is going to be low spec. And meanwhile, Persona's taken off so much on the PS4 because the PS4 is a good home for it, and the PS4 can elevate a game like that to a higher level. But a game like SMT5, which I hope will be really great, certainly, you know, knowing Atlus's philosophy behind this series, it should be a beautiful game aesthetically and everything, and narratively. But on the Switch, stuff like that will just get buried. Why would they finish developing it? It doesn't make sense. What sells on the Switch is, you know, these small games that you can play in incremental chunks, or also you could play forever, you know? And that's what you see on the Switch eShop. And that's what's popular and trendy today. That's what makes the most money, you know? And that's why the Switch is such a cash cow right now. It's all intertwined, you know? But like with the Wii, I mean, again, you didn't need like those other games on the Wii because people were so excited to work with the motion control. People were so excited to work with the DS, you know? I can't say the exact same of the GameCube. I didn't play that much third party on the GameCube. But I certainly felt that the GameCube was at least like as good as the PS2, if only because the controller, you know, in the era of, you know, N64 and PS1. N64 is an outright more powerful console. I mean, I can't say Nintendo was definitely kicking Sega's ass with the SNES, but certainly the SNES, maybe just by virtue of being first, was the console that yielded so much beautiful work. I mean, that's the JRPG golden age, right? That's like the dawn of like games with like a real story. And the NES, I mean, come on, completely revolutionized the whole world. So why, after all those generations, do we now have the Switch, which is inspiring other developers to make, you know, cash-in ports rather than create magnificent art like before? The answer is the Wii U. I mean, the Wii U changed everything. It was a failure. I mean, no matter how you look at it. And it really changed, you know, the landscape for Nintendo. It really changed their priorities. You know, Nintendo was like, just because we're excited about this doesn't mean everyone else is going to be. So we need to do something that just obviously captures the market. And to their credit, they did that in a way no other developer was doing, and in a way that, I mean, is definitely actually innovative, but it's not innovative in a way that's inspiring great art to be made for it. I mean, additionally, the old Nintendo, you had the Paper Mario series, you know? You had Kirby games that were actually really good, you know? Nowadays, Kirby is all 3D, and it's just hideous in 3D, you know? It doesn't look like Crystal Shards. It looks like, you know, grainy 3D, grainy Switch 3D. Every Switch game with 3D, for whatever reason, it's like there's no anti-aliasing on the console at all. It looks so grainy. If you put it on a big screen and actually look at it, you don't get that with like PS4 games. I don't know why. I mean, I haven't seen this with like any PS4 game, and every time I put on a game on my Switch, it just looks so grainy. I don't get it. It's supposed to be running 1080p docked, but it's as though people have said, well, it's 720p out of dock, And people really play the Switch out of the dock, so we might as well develop for 720. And I feel like that's what's happening. And it's also affecting the way games are made. I mean, if you've played Pokemon Sword and Shield, like, number one, those games are clearly rushed, and there's a lot of problems with it for that regard. But outside of that, outside of design decisions, the game is like, it doesn't look horrible. I mean, I could say that about any of these games. It doesn't look horrible, but when you really look at it, it's like clearly not at the level of what's coming out right now. It's just clearly not up to standards, up to my standards that I've developed from playing games from other developers on other consoles that are taking themselves, I would say, more seriously, artistically, you know? I mean, Sword and Shield, the Pokemon get drawn onto the screen when you're within like 4 paces of them. That's when they load in, and then they buffer out. Like it's like a Minecraft render distance of like, you know, one a quarter of a chunk or something. You know, it's ridiculous. I mean, something like that should be laughable. You shouldn't be allowed to release something like that and expect a return on your investment. I mean, it's pathetic. It takes me out of the experience so much to see a Pokemon suddenly up out of the ground when there's no grass there. Just get from small to big. There they are. Why? This is not a power I knew Pokemon had previously. Aren't I only playing this because it's a Pokemon game? Why are you changing what Pokemon are? Oh, render distances, right. And I guess people also do that, so interesting. And it's like... And I think the reason they're doing that is because they're developing for portable, you know, because Pokemon's portable. But they also want to make it so big and ambitious because it is on Switch. And they just can't do it. And I feel like the Switch can't do it. The Switch can't handle being a console. It's really a handheld system. And because of that, its games just never feel like they're living up to the potential of today. On top of the fact that it's not inspiring creativity from other developers, on top of the fact that Nintendo, I feel, has gone complacent, knowing how easy it is to profit off of that core concept of the Switch. I'm sure a Switch 2 is in development, and like, I don't know how long this era is gonna last. It might be forever, you know. I don't know if Nintendo will ever get back to a good place with this. I don't know if Nintendo will ever start innovating. And so, I mean, you know, through the Wii U era, I was totally faithful that Nintendo would make a comeback, because I know that they can capture the market the way they did with the Switch. I know that they have that power. But I was hopeful because I thought they would do it in a way that did what the Wii did, what the DS did, you know. I mean, I view that as the golden age of Nintendo. I know that's when some people fell off. But for me, that's like what those systems were doing. Created so much art that would never have existed otherwise. And nowadays, it feels like this Nintendo is completely content with the current state of the gaming landscape and is just trying to do what they can to play by the rules without looking like it. But I see through it. And I wish more people did, you know. You can go and buy an old game console for cheap and start playing old games on it, or just emulate them. You don't need all these ports. You don't need all these remasters. You don't need the Nintendo Switch Online. NES Online, SNES Online. You don't need the NES Classic, the SNES Classic. You don't need any of that. It's not adding anything of value to the gaming landscape, at least to me. I mean, that's who I'm looking at, you know. Because I know this stuff is valuable to other people. But I feel like I'm the only one who thinks this way, given the way I see people talking about it. And I'm making this video now because not only did I realize this is so important to me, is I realized that no one else is talking about this. No one seems to see it going on. Everyone's so bought into the marketing. Everyone's so excited for what are decent games coming out that they've forgotten the truly miraculously good games, you know, that are still being made, but that just aren't on the Switch. They just aren't there. It's very sad for me. I hope they get their act together because I have so much invested in this company. But I I personally don't believe they will. So that's it. Thank you for watching.